Category: Western Fiction. Author: Daniel Bellei. Cast players: Ryan Phillip as the United States Marshal Ryan Brandon, Jesse Metcalf as the United States Marshal Jesse Jackson, Austin Peters as Dan Boy the Kid, Josh Steele as the Missouri Kid, Tobias Tolnay as Kid Bronco, Sebastian Harmon as half-breed Johnny Snake Eye, W. Earl Brown as Sheriff Earl Riley, Brent Wilson as the bartender, David Michael as Dr. David Virgil. The Night of Deadsnake'S Massacre. Western fiction tale by Daniel Bellei. Narrated by Natural Reader. A special dangerous mission has been assigned to Marshal Ryan Brandon and Marshal Jesse Jackson, two of the youngest lawmen in the state of Missouri, both excellent gunfighters. Their mission is to pass through the community of Deadsnake to clean up the evil corruption in a closed-lipped gambling den, which is run by the local corrupt sheriff, Earl Riley. The high-state gambling is to raise money for greedy power, for the use of upfront paid-out money for hired killers and other criminal activities in the community. Deadsnake has the reputation of a small colony of the most unscrupulous state of affairs that you could imagine. It seems the criminal prospects overrun the law in this case. Well, just say there is no law there. The community of Deadsnake accepted the name from a longtime organizer by the name of William Baker, who ran the town with greedy taxes and brought fear on the community. Back then the town name was originally called Baker Corner. Most locals refer Mr. Baker as a dirty snake and a greedy man. So when Mr. Baker passed on from a strange mysterious death, the community renamed the town Deadsnake. Legends say that after William Baker's death he had put a curse on the town, which had brought in more the low life of the criminal elements. Oh hell, with all the shooting and killings that taken place there, that the cemetery has become far larger than the settlement itself. The weather was awfully bad that night of February 9, 1883, when lawmen, Ryan Brandon and Jesse Jackson arrived in the town of Deadsnake. Heavy snow and almost invisible condition was hard enough to come across the buildings on Main Street. It was the Silver Star Saloon where the expected corrupted gambling was taking place, which was supposed to be in a private closed door in the back room of the saloon. The two lawmen had removed their badges from their heavy coats first. This was done in order not to be publicizing their purpose of their operation. They then entered the saloon and headed straight to the standing bar. Bartender asked, "What will it be, strangers?" Marshal Ryan Brandon replied, "2 beers for my partner and me." Bartender uttered, "Just passing through, boys. You're lucky to get this far in this awful weather." Marshal Jesse Jackson applied, "Just here for a small business to take care of and we're out of here tomorrow. Do you know a good hotel in town?" Bartender uttered, "Most everything is fill up for the night because of the weather outside. We only have 2 hotels here in town. You can check across the street, but I doubt there is anything left." Ryan whispered to his partner, "You know something, Jesse, that corrupted Sheriff Earl Riley is here somewhere in a room gambling with some men. Perhaps when, or if we take him down with the others, we may have the use of the jailhouse for the night for our sleeping quarters." Jesse Jackson whispered back to his partner, "Sounds good to me, Ryan. Just hope he will be in the room when we are ready to raid it." Bartender uttered, "Gentlemen, so you two have some small business to do here, according to what I see. You two fellows are packed down heavy with weapons. I know it is none of my business, but although the settlement had seen more than enough violence, killings, we really don't want any more of it." Bartender paused a few moments and then continued to say, "What is your intention to whom you are doing business with?" Ryan Brandon replied, "Just like you said earlier, it is not of your business and I suggest you leave it at that." Ryan and Jesse slowly glanced around the saloon for a room that would assume to be the gambling room. Ryan Brandon uttered quietly to Jesse, "There is that small hallway next to the left side of the standing bar, which I think that will lead us to the back room." Marshal Ryan Brandon and Marshal Jesse Jackson further discussed their objective privately and then turned towards the bartender, and Jesse Jackson asked, "Mister, I am a good friend of Sheriff Earl Riley. I heard he has a high-state gambling game going on somewhere in a private room here and wanted if we can join in. It would only be just to pass the time until our main business tomorrow." Bartender questioned, "What private game? There is not any here I know of," Furthermore, I know Sheriff Earl Riley. I know what friends he has, and for you gunslingers, I have never seen you two before, and I doubt he has either. Marshal Jesse Jackson and Ryan Brandon stirred in close toward the bartender to draw their pistols quickly against the bartender's belly. They had done this quietly for not to get the attention of others in the saloon. Ryan Brandon whispered to the bartender, "You got a name, mister?" The nervous bartender replied, "Yes, is Patrick McMillian." Ryan replied, "Look, Pat, we are the United States Marshals for the state of Missouri, and we are here to clean up the corruption, and we know there is illegal high-state gambling in some back room. If you want to see tomorrow, then I suggest you will be assistance in information of what we need. First question, mister, is that the hallway to the back room of where the gambling is supposed to be taking place?" The shaky, nervous bartender quickly replied, Yes. Jesse whispered, "All right then, how many are there back there?" Bartender replied, "About 8 for the night, yes, just 8. Ryan Brandon asked, "Give me the names of them now so I know whom we dealing with." The fearful bartender at gunpoint replied, "Well, there is Sheriff Earl Riley." Ryan Brandon uttered, Yes, we already know about him, the main ringleader, real corrupted sheriff, all right? Go on, mister, who else?" Bartender replied, "Then there is some of the sheriff's men, the young half-breed called Snake Eye, and then also there is Dutch and Jake." Marshal Jesse Jackson conversed with his partner Ryan. "Johnny Snake Eye, I be damn, that is the young tall slender hoodlum we've been looking for a long time on a couple murder charges. At least if we able to snuff out this half-breed, it will be another snake that attached to the town name of Dead Snake." Ryan asked the bartender, "That is 4, who are the others?" Bartender uttered, "Then there is that young fellow, Kid Bronco, also the older fellow, Joe Blacker." Ryan looked at Jesse and whispered, "Kid Bronco, he is a deadly despicable killer, we need to be careful and make sure we get him before he gets us killed." Ryan Brandon went on, "All right, bartender, that is 6, who are the other 2? Bartender uttered, "Then there are the newcomers in the game, Dan Boy the Kid and Tim Patton, who is better known as the Missouri Kid." Both lawmen turned towards each other and Ryan Brandon whispered, "Oh fuck, a real hard case here, Dan Boy, a downright cocky son of a bitch, a hard criminal, thieving and murdering bastard. Missouri, a long-time childhood friend of Dan Boy, another thieving outlaw and a cold-blooded killer as well. Those young fugitives have a mile-long criminal record of thievery and killings in the state. I'm not surprised they found their way here in town. These 2 ruthless outlaws are dangerous and they both need to be eliminating for damn sure." Both Jesse Jackson and Ryan Brandon talked quietly over how to handle all of these ruthless criminals. Ryan Brandon uttered, "If we are planning to stay alive, we then must crash into the room fast with guns blasting, take these suckers down quickly without time for them to react. We'll kill every motherfuckers of them in the room. They all are killers and evil men, those bastards deserve to die." Jesse Jackson uttered, "Agree, a bit risky, but hell, I love the feel of the suspenseful action, let's just get it over with it." Bartender then uttered, "What about me, lawman? I am just a bartender, are you going to shoot me dead too?" Ryan Brandon replied, "Not if you cooperating with us, now quietly take us to the hallway." Without much notice to others in the saloon, the 2 lawmen directed the bartender at gunpoint to the small dark hallway. Meanwhile, in the back room behind closed doors, there is a large round table with 8 players taking bets and dealing out cards. Out of the older men and the sheriff in his mid-50s, there were 4 that were young. Dan Boy the Kid, Missouri, Johnny Snake Eye, and Kid Bronco being the oldest of the 4 mentioned. Sheriff Earl Riley uttered, "Welcome to your first private game, Dan Boy and Missouri. Hutch brought you 2 boys into the game by his recommendation to me. I heard a great deal of your reputation, you know, boys. With your youthful violent measures and your harsh cocky attitudes, you 2 pups could go a long way of taming this town. What I am saying is I could sure use you young fellows as added deputies." Dan Boy replied, "Hey mister, we're just here to play cards and make some good hard money. I have no taste for lawmen, even the corrupted ones, as much as you are." Sheriff Earl Riley replied, "Now boys, I am not such a bad fellow and not any worse than you young pups. However, if you change your mind, son, the offer is still open." Johnny Snake Eye had a different partial to the 2 boys. Snake Eye uttered, "I hope you play cards good as much as you 2 young dickheads do, as being as much as filthy brats and full of yourselves, mainly you Dan Boy." Dan Boy replied, "Fuck you half-breed." Are we here to play cards, or here to cuss each other out? You filthy half-breed, it will be a thrill to beat you at cards, so mister, shut your fucking trap and start dealing out. Sheriff Earl Riley uttered, "Now boys, enough of that, this is supposed to be a friendly game. Alright boys, the night is wasting away, now it is time to display your bets on the table." A few moments later, Kid Bronco uttered, "Where did you get all that cash, Dan Boy and Missouri, if I may ask? That rancher must be paying you good for working for him." Missouri chuckled and said, "Mostly from gambling, as you see we are spectacular good card players." Snake Eye uttered, "Shit. I think not boys, you're nothing more than dirty little criminals, but again, we'll see if you two young little monsters are any good here at this table." The truth of the matter that Dan Boy and Missouri had used some of the stolen loot they had robbed from the bank in Leadville a couple months ago. Back in the hallway, Marshal Ryan Brandon and Marshal Jesse Jackson were on each side of the bartender. Jesse uttered, "Now bartender, hand over the keys to the store." As soon as the bartender gave the keys to him, Marshal Ryan Brandon had come from behind and with the butt of his gun he hit the bartender in the back of his head. The bartender went down like a rock. The two lawmen quietly dragged the unconscious fellow away from the door and out of sight. Next, the lawmen prepare themselves steadily for the next move. Meanwhile, back in the room, Snake Eye had won the first round and had begun gathering the money into his hand when Dan Boy the Kid pulled his gun out at him. "I am calling you out, half-breed. I've been watching you carefully and those cards you have in your hands don't look right. I heard stories about you, you fucking dirtbag. I can see why you are called Snake Eye, an eye to move or lie like a snake and deceiving others, which also includes being a card shark. Am I right, Johnny Boy?" Johnny Snake Eye rose up angered and uttered, "No one calls me a cheat, especially coming from a filthy mouth of a murdering monster you are claimed to be. What are you going to do, shoot me?" As soon as Johnny Snake Eye finished his angry statement, the door flew open in front of all the players. The two lawmen guns were already in shooting motion. Dan Boy immediately turned his gun away from Snake Eye and begun shooting back towards the two lawmen. The others at the table had little time to draw their weapons. All hell broke loose, lead were flying about and bullet holes were making its mark upon the players rapidly. Blood were squirting and spraying about all over the room. It was a massacre in the making. The two lawmen had emptied their guns and kept on yanking out their other weapons to continue shooting through the whole event. Given that Dan Boy had his revolver already out in firing motion, he was the first dangerous enemy that needed to be eliminated in the minds of the lawmen. In the fast and death-defying seconds, Dan Boy was punctured with two slugs, which one bullet had planted deep into his lower mid-ribs and the other into his left upper arm, causing him much pain, yet, he managed the time between his two shots to plant a bullet in the side of Jesse Jackson's ribs, wounding the marshal enough to slow him down a tad. However, Marshal Ryan Brandon responded in the swift return shot which nailed Dan Boy with a slug below his left shoulder that also exited out his back. Dan Boy turned sideways, then went crashing into the floor. Kid Bronco was next to be riddled with bullets. Marshal Ryan Brandon and Marshal Jesse Jackson wanted to be sure he is dead promptly. Especially with the quick and deadly reputation that Bronco is known for before he would have the chance of killing them. Kid Bronco manages to fire a few shots but never was able to make his mark on the lawman. Bronco went down like a rock into the floor where he lay dead. The Missouri Kid fired one wild shot towards the lawman while rushing to the aid of his down partner. But in the process, he had taken 4 slugs into his mid-body. It had sent him into the floor about 2 yards away from Dan Boy's body. Missouri's lungs were practically obliterated. Just a few seconds into his excruciating suffocation, he had stared at his friend and saw that Dan Boy was still conscious and struggling hard to get back up from the floor. Seconds after that, Missouri departed this life. Sheriff Earl Riley quickly went next. He was riddled heavy with lead. He went down straight into the table. His own blood formed a pool of red liquid along the tabletop. The half-breed, Johnny Snake Eye, had also twisted around as he was riddled to pieces with lead. Snake Eye gave up the ghost and he went down lifeless. The others, Jake, Dutch, and Joe Blacker, had met their match and were instantly killed as well. The greatly wounded Dan Boy the Kid was the only one still yet alive at the last closing seconds. He had forced himself up from the floor during the shooting affair. He staggered about and forcing himself backwards towards the window behind him. Danboy was shooting as he went, while the others of his kind were in the progress of getting gunned down. Marshal Ryan Brandon had fired his last few shots towards the remaining opponent and planted a bullet into Danboy's chest. That rapidly had sent the kid backwards against the heavy drawn curtains and smashing him through the glass window and then into the snow outside. Then suddenly it became dead silence in the room. A thick smog of gun smoke filled the room, but soon it gradually evaporated and you can smell the odor of death. Marshal Ryan Brandon looked about the room and saw that everyone was motionless and figured that they must be dead. His wounded partner, Jesse Jackson, was exhausted after much shooting he done. With much tiredness and pain he eventually slid down against the wall in a sitting manner. Ryan Brandon uttered, "Let me look at your wound, Jesse." After he studied his partner's condition, Ryan Brandon replied, "Hell, Jesse, it could been worse, you need a doctor all right, but hell, you will live." Jesse Jackson replied, "Yes, not to worry, I'll be fine, let me rest here for a few minutes and catch my breath." Ryan Brandon kept his gun out and carefully strolled around the room to check on the bodies. He was convinced shortly after that these men were dead. Ryan next had pull away the heavy drapes from the tall window and peep out the broken glass where Danboy went sailing out of. As he stared outside he noticed that Danboy's body was not in sight, except there was a large amount of blood in the snow where he had lay. There were bloody footprints in the snow heading outwards. Ryan Brandon turned and looked at Jesse Jackson and said, "I can't believe it, that fucking kid is still alive, most likely not for long." Jesse replied, "He won't get very far and perhaps he is already dead out there somewhere, I'll be fine here, go out and find that fucker if he is still alive, then finish him off." Marshal Ryan Brandon crawled out the broken window and went searching after the gravely wounded Danboy. It was hard to see through the blowing wind and the dense fog. At least it had stopped snowing and he could still see the large blood tracks in the snow which would help Ryan to follow the kid's whereabouts. According to the blood trace in the snow, the wounded kid had staggered about and has fallen a few times to get to where he was heading to. Ryan called out, "Danboy, I know you are out there, come out and give yourself up. It is over. Come on Danboy, show yourself, you are not going to get anywhere far now in your condition." There was no response coming back from the seriously wounded criminal. At this point Ryan had figured that Jesse was right. Perhaps the kid may be dead after much staggering about and his body is somewhere near. Ryan Brandon moved a few more steps in the blowing wind and then suddenly shots were fired. Ryan had felt something painful in his chest and he looked down. Blood was dripping down his coat. Ryan Brandon had realized he'd been shot. Ryan staggered about a few seconds more when suddenly another slug plugged into his mid-ribs. He quickly dropped, landing him with his head down into the snow. Soon Danboy came out in the clear from the dense fog. He was staggering and tripping towards his victim. With little strength he had in him he kicked Ryan's body over to his front. Then aimed his revolver upon Ryan's head in order to finish him off. However, when he pulled the trigger he realized it was already empty of bullets. Danboy then lost his footing in his weakness and had fallen backwards down into the snow. He forcefully turned himself over and then crawled closer towards the body to pick up Ryan's gun. Danboy then forced his body back up and again aimed the weapon at Ryan Brandon's head. Ryan was still conscious and looked up at the kid. He noticed that Danboy was already on his last stage of his life. He was bleeding everywhere upon his body. He was choking blood out from his lips, having a hard time getting air from his lungs. Danboy was so much in pain that he was not able to spill out words through his mouth. When he had tried again blood kept on oozing out his lips. Peter replied, "Hell kid, either finish me off, or just drop dead, do something son." Then a loud voice was heard in the very near distance. "Hey, you motherfucking bastard, turn around you asshole, I am over here." Danboy slowly moved his gun away from his victim and then aimed it towards the direction of the caller. Not more than a second later Danboy immediately was riddled with bullets as he twisted in every direction he went. Blood was shooting out of him in all locations through his body. He was immediately stone dead before his body plunged into the thick snow. Moments earlier the wounded Marshal Jesse Jackson had come out to check on his partner after hearing gunfire. He saw Danboy pointing his gun over Ryan's head. Marshal Jesse Jackson took the opportunity with his revolver as Danboy turned and quickly let him have it with 5 rounds of lead. Jesse shouted, Serve you right, you fucking bastard. Have a nice day in hell with your filthy friend, Missouri, and the rest of the ones we exterminated. Immediately Jesse went to the aid of his downed partner. Marshal Ryan Brandon was in critical condition. It was imperative that Ryan get medical attention quickly, or he will die. Luck was good. Doc Dave Virgil was one of the best around in the state and as well as in this town. Doc Virgil had done hundreds and hundreds of digging out bullets upon his patients, as this town has its share of almost daily shootings. The bullets were dug out of Ryan and he had healed up quite quickly in time. Marshal Ryan Brandon was professionally treated by the best. Of course he had survived his near-death experience. The same for Marshal Jesse Jackson, where his wound was less a threat. Both manages to survive and later to tell their story to their grandchildren. The story of the famous Deadsnake'S Massacre. The end. Western fiction tale by Daniel Bellei. Narrated by Natural Reader.